Hello friends and happy Pride! Today we are talking about the Marvel Voices Pride anthologies. So Marvel Voices started out as a podcast hosted by Angelique Rocher in 2018, and it aimed to spotlight creators of color working for the Marvel brand. It ran as a podcast accompanied by written interviews that would be featured on the Marvel website until 2023 when the last episode of the show went up. There is an episode from 2024, however, it is in fact a trailer for a different podcast of the Marvel brand. And while the podcast is seemingly dead and buried as of now, Marvel Voices thrived in 2020 when it spread its wings from being simply a podcast to inspire the creation of an anthology. The mission remained arguably the same, to highlight the work of marginalized voices aligned with the Marvel brand. Angelique Rocher remains behind every single anthology that has come out under the Marvel Voices umbrella, and she would say about the first anthology, "Each one of the artists and writers who contributed to this book are true believers. Each was invited to tell a story uniquely important to them. This book is not just a product of their talents, but their perspective and the constant connecting thread of their love for Marvel." Marvel Voices #1 also features a collection of essays from creatives and cultural journalists discussing their favorite Marvel characters, stories, and comic book eras, and takes in-depth look at comic book history. Each of these essays, like the stories included in this anthology, were written from the author's or journalist's unique perspective, presenting a different range of topics and themes. Marvel Voices then went on to have many a spin-off spotlight series with titles such as Identity, Legacy, Heritage, Comunidades, and Pride. And today we are focusing on the Pride anthology books, which we have had a new one every year since 2021, and today I want to settle which one is the best. So I will be ranking every story featured in these anthologies, and I'll walk you through all of the other discussions and interviews as well, but I will not be ranking those. And if you would like to know more about the ranking system, I'm gonna be honest, it is a vibe-based process. I started off by ranking the stories from 1 to 5, but then I realized that just did not give me enough leverage to distinguish nuances, so I ended up ranking them from 1 to 20, which is how my country grades things. If that is confusing to you, just imagine that instead of 100%, we grade to 200%, you take the last numeral out, and that's essentially the grade that you're gonna get. And honestly, I cannot stress this enough, but when I like something, I just think it's neat. But when I don't like something, that's when I start yapping. So let's get into it. Marvel's Voices, Pride. Introduction. The book opens up with Prodigy, who is recording a voice memo on the importance of LGBT moments in the Marvel history, and walks us through the story of queer characters in the Marvel Universe, from the Silver Age all the way to current events. I think this is a very good first stepping stone to kick this off. If you were unfamiliar with the queer characters of Marvel and you went to pick up this book, just by looking at that story alone, you will realize that there are quite a few queer characters. There are 76 queer mutant characters, by the way. I will, however, nitpick some of the wording in this. There's this phrase, "Over time, our encounters with extraterrestrials and otherworldly beings challenge limited cultural notions of sex and gender." Are they trying to tell us that we got gender from aliens? The vows. Teddy and Billy's wedding vows. Quite sweet, quite short, it's literally only 1 page long, and immediately after they tell her to go read Empire. Very self-contained, but I think the fact that the original creative team, writer and artist, being back working on a Young Avengers content, is doing a lot of heavy lifting for me here. But yeah, that does tug at my heartstrings, so props for that. Under the Stars. Nico and Carolina try to go to a concert and while in line reminisce about how embarrassing it would be to explain to other people how they met. Not very exciting. It doesn't even reference anything in particular, it's all kind of vague. And I have not brushed up in my Runaways knowledge in a while, so I found myself a little lost. All reads in this book will be better reads if you are familiar with these characters, but this story did nothing for me. Something new every day. Daredevil, Elektra, runs into Dr. Charlene thinking she's working for the Kingpin producing mutant growth hormone, but she is not. She is in fact using the facility to research how to help trans women like her not having to take pills every day. They get interrupted by 5 cringe losers looking for mutant growth hormone, who don't even care to listen that there is none at the facility, so the girls end up having to kick their butts. The gag of the story being that one of the losers tells Charlene that his cousin is trans and that they might actually know each other. But Charlene says that not all trans people know each other. But actually, she does know the cousin in question. When a black cat crosses your path, you give them the right of way. Black Cat is looking for Steel Raven, who is impersonating her, but runs into Jesse Drake at the Fortress, a facility used to study mutants, mostly by torturing them. This was Jesse Drake's first appearance in almost 30 years. I'm not following Black Cat lore, so I don't know where this chasing Steel Raven goes, if it went anywhere even. But I do know that Leah Williams, the writer, had teased wanting to give Jesse Drake an important role in her book X Factor, but in hindsight, that book ended up cancelled before that story came to fruition, so it never happened. So, regardless of how much I would like to praise this story for bringing back Jesse Drake, Marvel's first transgender character, nothing came of it. Totally invulnerable. Titania tries to get revenge on She-Hulk for busting a heist she was involved in. Except, this is not She-Hulk she finds, but a fan of She-Hulk going to a cosplay convention dressed as her. Titania apologizes for the mix-up, and they have a chat. The fan in question is trans, and they talk to Titania about how inspiring it was for them seeing She-Hulk growing up. So much so that they even decided to name themselves Jennifer to match her idol when it came time to change her own name. This is a very sweet story, but unfortunately the main character is not reoccurring, and the other main character here is not even queer. But I still like it. Colossus. Tommy and David go on a pizza date, and David asks Tommy about how he found out he was bisexual, with Tommy then throwing the question right back at him. This is one of those stories that gives good insight for people who are maybe going through this situation, trying to figure themselves out, or, might also just be relatable for people who have already gone through it and found themselves on the other side having figured everything out. I think it's well written, and it does get a chuckle out of me every time. My only gripe is that David should be wearing his glasses in the panels where he is with Surge. We then get our first interview, this one with Chris Cooper. He is a former associate editor, and he worked with Bobby Chase on Alpha Flight 106. This is a great interview to feature in this comic since at the end, spoiler, they will give you some snippets of this exact comic. Alpha Flight 106, which is the issue in which Northstar officially came out as gay. Though I will question, was it wise to have it just appear in the middle of the comic? Shouldn't this interview have been placed further at the end of the book where it is closer to the Alpha Flight pages so that we could better understand the situation that's at hand? I'm not entirely sure. I don't know how these things get planned, but that's not how I would have organized this, but yeah. Good Judy. I don't like this story. But Bia, you have been on tape saying that you do like this story. So what's up? Well, 2 things can't be true at once. And so we have Jonas and Megan telling Victor about maybe putting himself out there more. It's a very real conversation about expectations and fearing of not having your expectations met, in Victor's case because of his mutation. Jonas reminisces on how good of a friend Victor has been to him by helping him adjust to the 21st century, and Victor talks about how important his friendship to Jonas is. And if this was just a story, I would love it. But no. I don't like that we had to go and throw Akihito in here. Listen, it's not romantic or anything, and it's not meant to be, at all. It's all in good fun. But I do cringe a little bit thinking about it. Akihito invites Victor and Jonas to dance with him because he can sense that Victor is fawning over him. Victor, you went to school with Akihito's sister. You can find him hot, but he does not have to entertain that in any way, shape, or form. Why did we have to ruin a perfectly good moment? Early thought. I love this story. It's very simple in concept. It revisits Bobby's early years at the mansion and his crush on Warren, and how that made him feel even more ostracized than just being a mutant made him feel. Magneto comes around to beat Professor X's butt, but ends up doing some emotional work with Bobby, talking about how it should be the mission of the difference, to make the world a place less lonely for others. Professor X not even home, by the way. How can you not love this story? I mean, look at it! The Man I Know. A little bit of Kyle's internal monologue about how much he loves Jean-Paul. It's well written, and it's very true to character. It's not groundbreaking in any way, because we already knew all of this stuff. Your love is beautiful, so don't be a jerk to people. Great motto. The Grey Ladies. Mystique kills a homophobe on the Orient Express. Mystique impersonates Irene as she plays a game of chess with a doctor or whatever, who shows her that he is in possession of some incriminating evidence. Photos of Irene and Raven, who is in her true form, kissing. The doctor says that he will keep it a secret if Irene hands over Raven to be studied by him, and if she agrees to become his wife. Mystique shapeshifts, kills the guy, and dumps his body out of the moving train. You deserve. At the Hellfire Gala after party, Karma gets a pep talk from Magic to work up some courage to talk to Galora, and in doing so, lands a girlfriend. Magic is being a great friend. Karma is riddled with self-doubt because she fears that her desire for Galora will intertwine with her powers and potentially make Galora's attraction for her not genuine. Magic says that if Karma really wants Galora to have a saying in the relationship, she needs to be given the chance to make a choice. And to make a choice, she needs to be asked to make one. So Karma gathers up some courage to ask her on a date, and Galora is 100% set on taking up that offer. Karma and Galora might still be girlfriends. We haven't seen them together recently. And since the story literally sets up the groundwork for the story in which Karma's gibberish name will be fixed, this is a great story, no questions asked. Man of his dreams. New debutante. Carl Valentino, aka Somnus, is a mutant that Akihiro met in the 60s and has just died of old age. Akihiro decides to have him resurrected on Krakoa so that he could live his life to the fullest this time around without fears. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, if the 5 would allow that type of resurrection. You know, does he have some perks because he's working with X Factor? I don't know. The story is quite simple, but it's really nice. In the 2020s, we had a lot of good groundwork trying to humanize Akihiro, and this is another good story that does so. I mean, if you could have the chance to go back and live your life without fear, like, what would you do with it? I love the concept of this character, and he did go on to have a more prominent role in following years in Marauders Volume 2. I think introducing a character in a setting like this could lead to disaster. And by disaster, I mean stagnation, a character that only exists once, essentially. At least Somnus went on to do stuff, so good for him. I think the fact that he had such a good character design also helped, honestly. Like, this is lovely design. Love is love. Alright, so this is not really a story, it is actually just an illustration by Jacopo Camini, R.I.P. King. I feel like it was sold to us that this would be a story, but it's not, because it is featured on the index. It's basically a pinup. I'm not against pinups in the middle of comics, although I will say the only other example that comes to mind of having pinups in the middle of comics is the swimsuit special. But you know, the fact that this is the only one that is even featured in this story, kind of odd. I feel like you could have sprinkled more lovely little pinups of other artists throughout the anthology. I just don't feel very strongly about it, because there's no story to this. And so at the end, here we have Alpha Flight number 106, which is the comic book that was referenced in the interview with Chris Cooper. Now, the first time I read this, I missed the part where it told you that it's not the full story, it's just some segments. And so I was rather confused when details I remembered were not there. So if you have never read this story in its entirety, please do. Major Maple Leaf is less of an asshole, actually, but whatever. Now, I ought to believe that they would not put the entirety of that other comic in here because of cost. as we would end up with an even beefier book and probably a heftier price tag to match. This was $9.99 on release, by the way, which I don't think is a bad price for the amount of material. It's a lot of book. Again, I will complain that I think that this should have followed the interview, so the interview should have been pushed to the end of the book to have this follow immediately after. But that's just a me thing. And while I understand the significance of this reprint, I think it's a bit annoying because you're not even getting the actual full story. It's just a truncated version. I think this would have been a great time to add in like a code or something. You already bought the comic. They're already teasing you here with a good chunk of the story. Why not add in a little code so you could like redeem the issue on Marvel Comics app or something? And in hindsight, featuring this story here, of course, it's pointing out the fact that this is Marvel's first gay character to be out. But I feel like they were also really trying to pave the way to reintroduce Joanne. It had been brewing since X Factor number 2 or something, when Kyle comments on how much John Paul sounds like a dad. So them becoming parents had been teased. Later that year, we will get Trials of Magneto with the Waiting Room revelation, so reintroducing Joanne at this point would have been smart for audiences who have never read this original story and are not familiar with her. But unfortunately, that storyline has not moved. It's been years and still no baby to be seen. Marvel Voices Pride. This one opens up with some words from Alex Phillips. A good read, reflects on the importance of queer media and how important the Marvel Voices Pride is, and its importance in uplifting the voices of queer creators to allow them to create stories like the one that you see on the screens and in comic books. They do try and kind of pass this off as it being a comic, because again, it's featured in the index, but by the time you get to the index, you have already read it. And also, they have it called Introduction in the index, but it's not called Introduction anywhere else. So what happened? Did we copy and paste the layout from the year prior? All my exes in the Nexus. First time I read this, I had a great sense of deja vu. Where have I read this before? I thought that perhaps Loki's exes showed up to terrorize him in Young Avengers Volume 2, so I had to go pick up that book to check it out. And alas, it was not Loki's exes, it was Novar's exes. Anyway, I did not find this story to be particularly fun or interesting. It felt a little bit unoriginal. It just pulled too many themes from the second volume of the Young Avengers. America at the diner, trying to get bacon on her pancakes, Teddy and Billy showing up, Billy being the one more likely to care for Loki, portal hopping. All of this has literally happened before already. So yeah, maybe I'm biased because I guess I just don't really like Loki in my Young Avengers, so this story was not for me. The horse was funny though. Ancient and Modern. Ancient and Modern. A story on Hercules and Novar. They reminisce on how different they are while trying to fight off a Medusa that is both Kree and Olympian like themselves. What did Noah actually do to revert the petrification? I did not understand. Because I feel like he didn't do anything, but suddenly people weren't stone anymore. So yeah, that's a mystery. I don't know what he did, but that's fine. LGBTD. We are introduced to a bunch of new characters, all of whom are trans, and attend the support group Super Trans, a group of superpowered individuals who are trans, hosted by D-Man. They were going to get Spider-Man to be a speaker at their meeting that day, but he gets knocked out by some supervillains, the Sinister Syndicate, so the kids, alongside D-Man, who did bring his suit, fight the bad guys. This is a fun story. These characters will pop up later in this book, and they will go on to have an entire and limited comics arc to themselves. Comics Decoded. An essay by Angelique Rocher, where she talks about the Comic Code Authority and the censorship in comic books, how some older characters have been explicitly queer for a while, even when it wasn't allowed. This essay also highlights the characters Taku and Venom, who are the main characters of the following story. So finally, we get an essay/interview that is relevantly positioned within the anthology. Yes! Perfectly seen. So, as we have established, reading the previous essay by Angélique Rocher is fundamental to dive into these characters if, like me, this is your first time encountering them. Venom tries to have a romantic picnic with Taku but gets interrupted, having to intercept some mercenaries. This is the first time that they are displayed as full-blown lovers, but they are also said to be married even. So this is the sort of thing that it's not even a retcon, it's more like being told something that you didn't know yet. Surprise, these guys have been husbands for a while. Good for them. This really is the sort of thing that is great because it exists. And having it juxtaposed with the essay just now explaining how Venom was always written as being gay, but the Comic Code Authority was making it impossible to spell it out precisely. This is poetic cinema.
Stay out of my mind, turf, Jack.
The Grandmaster has intercepted Moondragon's mind, as she's having this dream related to a movie she was watching with the Guardians, where rival biker gangs face off against each other. She is the leader of a biker gang called the Dragons, and Philovel is the leader of the Marvels, a rival gang. In the dream, Hatter asks why should the gangs fight each other when the mayor is the real villain of the story, so they join forces to beat him. In her dream, the mayor is Grandmaster. As the town rallies up against the mayor, Philovel and Moondragon make out, and when the mayor ends up defeated, this also defeats Grandmaster's influence over Heather. I'm always going to love an anti-establishment message. However, I will say, I don't think the story is particularly interesting because it happens in the dreamscape. It's basically a dream. It could be like an alternate universe. It doesn't have much repercussions with the real universe, you know?
Over the rainbow.
Valkyrie tries to get Thor to argue to a pride party in Asgard, but Thor refuses, arguing that they should be a little bit more serious and not party so much. Loki eavesdrops on the conversation and suggests that the celebration be held at Jotunheim. The celebration sucks. It's actually a Loki pride party, not a pride party. Thor shows up and Valkyrie complains that he would show up to Loki's pride after refusing to host Valkyrie's suggestion of a pride party. Thor says that he would never deny a party, let alone a pride party, as he is an ally. And besides that, he never had a conversation with Valkyrie in the first place because he was busy with the Avengers. Turns out it was a trick and Loki was impersonating Thor earlier. Then Valkyrie and Thor do go on to host a pride party in Asgard. And then they derail the whole thing by having Loki shapeshift into Lady Loki right at the end and asking if Valkyrie would like to make out, with Valkyrie replying that she might need another beer. Why?
Permanent sleepover.
We are introduced to Shayla Sexton, Escapade, and Morgan Red, vigilante duos and trans besties. I've talked extensively about this story before, and just the fact that the resolution for it comes much further down the line in a different book altogether tells you all you need to know about how this is indeed an interesting read, and definitely worth reading for the setup. We follow Shayla, who after a successful heist encounters Emma Frost and Destiny, who tell her that she should go to Krakoa to hone her powers to prevent a fated event where her wrong actions will lead to the death of Morgan. Spoiler for the future, Morgan does not die. Shayla goes on to be a main character in Avengers Academy. Listen, the story is great, and the Peanut-style art, flashbacks thrown in there, it's just so charming. Yeah, so this book decided that what it needed were some encyclopedia entries. And now I wonder, like, shouldn't we be spending precious page space with, I don't know, queer stories by queer creatives? I love a data page as much as the next person, but why? Now, the characters who are featured are all queer, so at least there's that. And the choices were Kyle Girard de Bobière, Jumbo Carnation, Escapade, who just debuted in the previous story, okay, Somnus, Valkyrie, and Viv. Yeah, why couldn't we use these pages to instead have stories where these characters are featured? I feel like that would have been a better selling point in the visual media that is comics, you know? Their excuse to have these is that they are highlighting characters who have never been in handbooks before. Again, Escapade literally just debuted. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, of course she has never been in a goddamn book. This is her first appearance. Why are we literally have just been introduced to her. Why are we then, 3-4 pages later, dedicating a whole entire page to point out, like, the little diagrams with, like, agility and speed? Like, what the hell? Listen, I'm not dogging on the Encyclopedia of the Marvel Universe. It's definitely a great resource. But I feel like even maybe just naming characters and pointing out labels and suggesting books where you could keep up with them, I feel like that would be better served. Like, it doesn't even need to be, like, current publications, future one, because there's a dedicated page for that at the end of the anthology. I'm talking about promoting old books, really. Books that are available, should be available in the Marvel Unlimited app or whatever. Like, I understand that, you know, current sales, current books is, like, what is important. But, yeah, because in hindsight, I can say there are so many queer characters who have never been featured in Pride anthologies. So taking the time and the space in one of these anthologies to not dedicate it to writing, to highlighting more creators even. First and foremost, highlighting more creatives. So I don't understand. Sure, these characters have never been featured in handbooks before. That's fine. Are you not making a handbook anytime soon? Because I feel like if you already have this material, or if you want to make this material, that's when you put it in the handbook. Why are we wasting time putting it here? Again, literally wasting space on having Escapade in here. We literally just met. I'm gonna complain about something else. I did not read the content of these pages, but I will tell you that the part that I did read, Kyle is said to be a former spokesperson for Department H. This has never been a position that Kyle held. Kyle debuted working for Team North Star Extreme Snow Sports. And also, again, they mention him being the adoptive father of Joanne. Still no baby, but they keep bringing it up. I'm mad about this book.
Marvel's voices pride.
I'm sorry, I glossed over the first portion of this book. Don't ask me how I did that. It's an essay called Our Superpower by Mary Chifo, and the underlying themes, queerness is a superpower.
Everything's coming up aces.
Gwen talks directly to asexual and aromantic readers about their belonging at Pride, while trying to organize a Pride party where she invites all of the Arrow and Ace characters and even gets Dazzler to perform. Good to note that she acknowledges all of the Arrow and Ace characters. However, I feel like that story would have really benefited from identifying all of the characters. That being said, that could have been good for every single Pride story so far anyway. But I would argue that the romantic asexual characters maybe are not as well known as some of the characters that we have seen before. So, you know, can you name 5 of the characters featured in this book? Because listen, if we had the damn boxes with the names, I know that I would not have to see New Mutants fans on Twitter talking about Run at Pride. Put some respect on my son, Jamie Rogers. This is a fine story, but I do think I like the Love Unlimited story a little bit more.
What may bloom.
Right off the bat, I did not know who this character was or what I should be looking for here. I'm told that this is a follow-up story from a 2015, maybe 2016 book called The Ultimates. And this is how this girl, Logan, came to have powers after she stole back her research, after it got shut down by Captain Marvel, and she became infected, I guess could be a word, by a cosmic cube and ISO 8 compound that she was investigating. That compound spilled onto her skin when she was trying to retrieve it, and that's how she got her powers. The original Nightshade was her cousin, sometimes aunt, and she will end up taking that name for herself. She is bisexual and is in a sapphic relationship. I need to specify that you would not know that she is bisexual or the cousin/aunt debacle if you had only read this story. I got this information from reading interviews about the character and also her page on the fandom wiki. This story ends with a caption, "The End" or "The Beginning." So I looked it up to see where she went after this. And that's when I realized that this was actually her first appearance. Which really explains why I didn't know her. Now, for previous anthologies, the debutantes have been mutants, which are much more up my alley of interest. So I'm going to assume that this character was advertised as debuting in this book. I've looked up articles from the time, and yes, indeed, she is. But I'm pretty sure that every time I've read this book, I have skipped the story. Because again, X-Men stuff is more up my alley. I'm not trying to be unjust here. Trying to put my mind back into that 21, 22 mindset when I read the other Pride anthologies, when I knew I was looking at new characters. And I'm trying to figure out how to approach them. And I guess this story did nothing for me. I found that the constant time jumps made it hard to trace the timeline of events. And the fact that there were no familiar faces that I could look back into to guide me through the story made it kind of frustrating. I think maybe as a standalone story, as like a #1 issue of a new book, this story would have done better. I think having it featured here in the middle of this anthology, I think I got a little bit lost. Unfortunately, this story was not it for me. Next up, we have an interview with P. Craig Russell. He did one of the variant covers for this anthology, and he was one of the first mainstream artists to be out as a gay man.
Put in Spiel.
Webweaver gets caught up solving a crime where someone breaks into a pawn shop and steals some items. He knows the family who owns the shop and wants to help them. The stolen item is a cup, part of a set with a matching plate/saucer that is engraved with the family's name. He was running late for a date and ends up telling the date about the case, with the man, Asher, pointing out that the engraved name on the plate is Jewish and that they should go to the Jewish Community Center to get some help trying to find the targeted family, because the heist seems to be pretty targeted. While there, the community center is holding practice of their Purim Spiel celebration, a holiday celebration when this badass Queen Asher played 12-dimensional chess against some anti-Semites and saved the Jewish people. While there, they end up spotting the kid who took the items. Turns out these stolen items belonged to his family, but they were low on money, so they pawned some items. This kid knew how important the cup was to his grandma, so he wanted to get it back. In no way is this story particularly inspired, or queer even. Queer characters on a date. Still, I will give it props for really utilizing the voices theming here and highlighting Jewish culture. But the question remains, like, what costume is he actually wearing to appear in Spiel? Like, is he turning up as Webweaver?
Everywhere.
Wiccan and Hulkling go on a new honeymoon attempt, and their car breaks down at a gas station where they meet Lacey Lorraine, the cowgirl transgender working the cash register, who will help them fix their car. Because it's a no magic kind of holiday, but they will use magic to fix the car, so... The story is mostly about Lacey being this immortal being with ADHD on her quest to change her form. This story starts up a little bit bitter with Teddy and Billy growing up in the parking lot to not get a hate crime at a gas station in the middle of America, so... Themes in this are strong enough that I don't want to denote that. There's an interesting identities discussion surrounding squirrels, that's always interesting, but that is not the main focus. And it's not even regarding Teddy, it's about another character that Lacey references that I didn't even write the name of, so really must have been that interesting. But yeah, in a way, it almost makes me wish that Teddy and Billy weren't here, and I like Teddy and Billy, but why are they here? They're doing nothing for the story. Also, I feel like some of the wording in this story is a bit odd and like, squirrel slurs? What?
Be gay, do crime.
Black Cat and Gambit are in New Orleans, and Gambit attacks a bunch of turfs with an exploding trans flag-colored lollipop, leaving the turfs covered in gooey sugar. That, of course, is not the main event here, but for me it was, because that was the best part. Gambit is taking Felicia to the headquarters of the guild, and she decides to steal the jewel in which Kendra is imprisoned. Not for the jewel, she wants to talk to Kendra and ask her on a date. So do Black Cat and Kendra go on a date? Well, Lady doesn't kiss and tell, so I guess we'll never know. I would say this is a funny concept, but clearly I was more into the Gambit blows lollipops at turfs. Yeah, the fact that I enjoyed the part of the non-queer character better than the part of the queer character. Tells you all you need to know about this story. The Making of Red Sea, which still sounds like rat poison. Hate that name.
Big Star could never.
We get an interview with Teenie Howard, explaining how she got the pairing to work, but she's also here to promote her new book, which I forgot the name of. We also get a bit of how we got here and talking about Betsy and Rachel's history. Now, I'm fine with the interview. Get your work out there. Teenie Howard's queer herself, so a great candidate for an interview about your queer work being put into the queer anthology. However, why are we teaching folks about Betsy and Rachel when they are not at all featured in any story in this anthology? I feel like this story bit would have been a better fit to be featured in Howard's book. And even then, it might be a little bit off because, it's a #1, yes, fresh new start, but arguably you would have known a little bit about Betsy before you picked up that book anyway.
No trespassing. Beware of dog.
Muzzle has a symbiote and they are part of the Commune, a Robin Hood-esque queer human anarchist crew who lives and works together. And they run into Spider-Man while trying to get some pharmaceuticals from Stark Industry. This is yet another unmarked debut, but it did not overstate its welcome by dragging itself too far. This is immediately followed up by an interview with M.R. Daniel, who will be the editor for a story including Muzzle, who is trans-mask, indigenous, and a symbiote-human hybrid. This story coming later from Marvel Unlimited. I cannot stress this enough that once again, this interview should have been placed before the comic, so we could get a hint of this character before getting started. Knowing these details beforehand would have made me more interested in the character, because there's nothing worse than assuming things based off of art or vague lines to be disappointed later when there's new information revealed that disproved your theory. So why are we not putting interviews before stories? The interview does not spoil the story at all, so why are we not taking advantage of that?
Jumbo Carnation's ultimate creations.
Of course, I would be a sucker for the story that focuses on sewing, and yet the sewing is the weakest part, trust me. The best part is Jumbo's heart-to-heart with Viv about queerness not being something that needs to be proven. Queer is just something that you are, and it does not need to be outward projected to be accepted/respected by others. This story also features that stupid trope of explaining that superhero life is bonkers, and so Kyle must be weirded out by it, but that he is the world's best husband for putting up with it. Yes, he is. And listen, it's not like I expect to get Kyle development from the Jumbo Carnation story.
Today's lesson.
Carmen details a training exercise that goes awry to her girlfriend, Buddy. This story also establishes Spectre and Greymalkin as a couple when Spectre refers to Greymalkin as his boyfriend. Spectre was one of the original Academy X kids, and he had not been seen since being depowered on M-Day. The kids mess up kinda badly, but nothing matters in the end. A new path for Carmen is established as she makes a new outfit debut, and she will also later join Madeline Pryor's Dark X-Men and get a new codename as Faint. Since this book is a setup for that entire adventure, that's good. The anthology finishes with a compilation of messages from readers, which is always lovely to hear some positive messages.
X-Men, the wedding special.
Marvel Voices Pride 2024 is actually called X-Men, the Wedding Special edition of Marvel Voices Pride, where the writers may be queer, but the stories? Yikes. Now let me explain. I have this memory of them publicizing this issue as something like, we are bringing awareness to the allies. Now, I will say, I tried and looked this up. I went on Twitter and looked up if the word allies had ever been used by Marvel Comics, by the Marvel account, and nothing relating to this came up. But I vividly remember that, and I have referenced that more than once. So, listen. Either I hallucinated all of this, or it did happen and then they, deleted it. But, whatever.
Wait, am I thinking of the Pride Alley variants that came out for a couple of comic books? 2024 was the blunder year of Pride, I swear.
Because I feel like that really tainted my perspective on these books. Because, let's forget rainbow capitalism here for a moment. But, like, who are the Pride anthologies pandering to? Because I swear it's not big ego allies. It's queer people. Queer people are the target audience of the Pride anthologies. So why would we try and cater to the allies? The allies read the stories if they like the characters. So maybe a bigger, more diverse cast of characters is the way to alienate allies, or maybe some non-allies. Probably not, but yeah, whatever. My question for this book is why? Why are so many non-canonically queer characters the main focus of this goddamn book?
Something borrowed, something blue.
This story sets up the shenanigans later to come. It's split inside the book, which is a tad odd. Also, since chronologically every other story in this anthology had happened before the actual wedding, so I feel like this should have just been the last story of the book, no splitting. But I don't know, they decided to split it for some reason. At the altar, Destiny refuses to marry Mystique because she is not real. No, she is in fact a clone that Mr. Sinister has gifted them, which they have used as a distraction so Mystique could go on a heist while the Avengers were busy attending the ceremony. Kind of iconic, but honestly not all that interesting.
Wedding Gatecrashers.
Betsy and Rachel fight alongside the Captain Britain Corps to defeat Gatecrasher, who was hired by Saturnine because she didn't get invited to the wedding and is pretty bitter about it. So her plan is to defeat either Rachel or Betsy and take their invite to get in. I'm not sure I follow. Is there a connection between Saturnine, Mystique, and Destiny? Or is she just big mad, she's nosy, she likes parties? Is Saturnine a recurring figure at big weddings? What is the deal here? I have no idea. The narration bits about Betsy and Rachel are definitely the best part. The corpse, I don't care for. But, like, are they all queer too? Because, like, we got queer goose, queer dinosaur. That's pretty cool. Again, I did not understand the connection between Saturnine and the wedding. And since I also don't care for the corpse,
Get Mystique, a gift.
Anole is right from the start. Everybody wants to celebrate Mutant Kind's premier terrorist just because she's bisexual? Kind of iconic. Wolverine tasks Anole, Pixie, and Bling to help source a gift for Mystique. The kids make suggestions and all of them get dismissed by Wolverine, who will end up getting Mystique a gun, which was Victor's initial suggestion anyway. Wolverine puts up a spiel about the kids understanding their elders, which, yes, Wolverine is the main character of this story in the Pride anthology. And the kids, half of whom are queer, are actually the butt of the joke. Mystique points out that it's great that Wolverine does all this because he is a teacher, and being a teacher is the greatest gift one can give. The story concludes by making a dedication to all teachers doing everything in their power to help their queer students. And while I think that is a lovely message, I can't help but notice that the students in question here were not having any problems before Wolverine arrived with a quest. He doesn't help them get anywhere necessarily, and they don't even go through a journey that teaches them some sort of message or anything. Their identities are not discussed, addressed, or explored. You may want to argue that the last panel implies that Pixie may join a polycule and that Indra and Anole might get together. Pixie and Indra being the two characters from this anthology on whom we do not have a canonical confirmation on their queerness, let's say. But it's been a while, and I'm here to tell you that none of those statements are true. There has been no further discussing of any of these characters' identity. So we essentially had a story where 3/5 of the cast were not even canonically queer as of writing this in 2026. And all they do is bicker. Bling is extremely unpleasant the entire time. She's making fun of both Jean-Paul and Victor, and if I'm reading a Pride anthology, I want to celebrate the characters. I don't want a dog on them, okay? Also, may we remember that Bling has history with Mystique, and it is not amicable. Mystique was terrible to Onyx, which made her turn on her. Like, sorry if I hold a grudge like a motherfucker, but I would not be going to that wedding if I was Bling. And also, I'm not qualified to comment, But I have seen people bring up that since Indra is Jane, that he should not even be handling the flowers. I don't know about that, but I thought I'd mention that. I guess he also wouldn't be helping harvesting the horn either. Listen, maybe he did not join on, like, harming the creature. He was just there to try and help Victor, who is getting re-traumatized by Limbo. So yeah, I don't think this story nailed whatever it is that it was trying to achieve. Wolverine is old as hell. He can for sure have queer friends, you know, but even just writing about how he views his own queer children would have been more interesting. But I guess this is the wedding special, so we had to shoehorn Mystique and Destiny in here somehow. Yeah, I feel like the story could have been 10 times better if they weren't somehow involved in this. And somehow, Wolverine being the main character of a story in the Pride anthology is not even the biggest issue. I need to stop, because the more I think about the story, the angrier I get.
Ipe is truth.
Emma offers some couples counseling as a wedding gift, but technically this takes place before the wedding, so having this story featured in the middle of the wedding makes no sense. Hence why I complained about the story being split up. That first story being split up. So Emma offers some couples counseling and makes Mystique talk about handling Irene's ashes. This story is compiled at the end of the anthology as a bonus for reference. Mystique and Destiny talk about it, and Emma concludes that their love is real, yada yada. Wrong. If the Unslay cottage at the beginning had not given it away, this is not Emma. This is Loki posing as Emma. And Emma is here too, actually. She's posing as Mystique and Destiny to get Loki. Does your brain hurt? Oh, look at the drawing in these tea leaves. Mystique and Destiny are destined to be together forever. Babe, I'm reading the wedding issue of the couple in question. Unless this revelation comes from a heart-to-heart between the two, I don't really care to hear it. And I surely don't need to hear it from two characters cosplaying three others. What the fuck was the point of this story?
The thief's surprise.
In this story, Rogue and Destiny have a conversation about marriage while Gambit runs into the Guild of Thieves. This story has many problems, the main one being that it is not canon compliant in any way, shape, or form. First off, is Destiny omnipotent? Because I just realized that I may not know much about Destiny. But let me ask, like, isn't there a limit to what she saw in her visions? I think sometimes she can see alternate realities as, like, different outcomes for different situations. Like, that's what she tells Moira. She might live 11 lives if she makes the right choice at the end, right? But was she able to see things beyond her death? Because if she can, first, that debunks the previous story that, as we have established, is fake and irrelevant, because she would have seen Raven suffer through her grief. But most importantly in this story, she talks about learning that Anna would marry Remy and being so excited for her. Not canon compliant. Destiny has said, when I learned Rogue married a bunkin thief from the Bayo, I asked them to kill me again. So which is which? The writer also missed that Destiny and Mystique have been married before. But the biggest offender in this entire story is the lack of communication between other writers and artists working on the anthology. We have this very cute moment of Rogue talking about wearing these earrings and this power-dampening bracelet on her wedding, and wanting her mom to wear them as well. She does put the earrings on, but no confirmation on whether she will use the bracelet or not. But like I hinted, there is a lack of communication between the other parts involved, and so Destiny is not wearing the earrings or the bracelet in any other artist's rendition in this book. So the relevance of this story is absolutely null. And I also just don't care that Gambit is getting his ass served by the guild. The publication journey of Mystique and Destiny. Again, this is the sort of thing that would have been lovely at the beginning of the book, not at the end, because if I were not familiar with these characters, then I would have liked to learn before I delve into the stories, you know? Again, who organizes these things? An interview with Chris Claremont. An interview with the original creator is always great. If the creator is cool too, that is. This is how I learned that the mask that Destiny wears has a purpose and is in fact not an accessory. So, good to know that. Right, and then we get down to bonus content. The bonus content featured in this book is Marvel Voices Iceman, exclusive, they say, and yet, in a year or so, they will actually publish this entire thing after the Orlando story that followed this Vecchia one had already wrapped up. A really weird choice. They were low on publishing material that month or something. So yeah, they tell you that this is an exclusive, but it's not going to be an exclusive forever. Then we have X Factor Annual 6, which explains the reference from earlier, which, as we have established, is super useless. Because if you wanted to educate readers on this moment, having this story here, compiled here, would suffice. Like, I don't need to read Loki masquerading Emma and Emma masquerading Mystique and Destiny to teach me about this story. What was the point of that?
Marvel United, a Pride special. Who we are.
Shayla, Aaron, Loki, and Dr. Charlene take on the ghost of Hitler. What's not to love on a story about beating up Nazis? Props for utilizing Shayla's power to cosmically extend and calling back to her friendship with Loki from Avengers Academy. Which again proves that yes, indeed, you can reference older comics in these anthologies. Again, might be because Avengers Academy is an online only and there's no physical copies of it, but if they can do it for one, they should be able to do it for all the others, just saying. So basically, to defeat the physical embodiment of hate, Loki tells Shayla to become the psychic embodiment of love, and so she channels the supportive people who would love her across the universe and defeats it. This story also reminds us that hate is nothing but an industry, because there will always be people who can profit off of creating harm for others. So yeah, remember that the most important thing is to stay strong and together, because we have been here the whole time, and we are not going anywhere.
Good night, Blue Rose.
Mystique has a dream about erasing Kurt. I've complained about stories that are mostly dreams in a previous book, and I'll complain about it again. This has a lovely message about accepting yourself and being assertive in a universe that may not always love you. It's cute, but I feel like I got a dog on it, because it's one of those that is essentially not relevant in any way, shape, or form. And having it directed at Kurt really does not solidify it as it being a queer messaging. And yes, Kurt here is in a queer household. This message could be the same exact one if the story was about racism. And I mean, I guess in a way it kind of is. It just does not work for me for these characters in this situation. And listen, you're never gonna be able to sell to me Mystique being a loving mother, like, no.
The Bolter.
Sarah tries to rob a diamond to pay back her dues, but runs into Black Cat, who also wants the diamond. And as the two fight over it, Black Cat accidentally breaks one of the runes that is holding the Spare, a Fear Lord, captive. Despair crushes them with the embrace of regret, visions of painful moments of their lives. But the girls manage to break out of it because they both see something wrong with their guilt trip and trap the demon inside the diamond again. Felicia tells Sarah that she is clearly still in love with Angela, and so she should go looking for her. I started this wondering if Angela and Sarah were still broken up, and I guess they still are, because this was Sarah's most recent appearance. So, good intentions with the story, but if you really wanted to advance the Sarah and Angela story, the leap should have been taken. Commit to the bit, have Angela and Sarah reunite for real. And yeah, this also does not advance Felicia's story in any way.
My Buddy.
A story focusing on Arnie Roth. This is the character that the MCU appropriated to make their Bucky Barnes, if you're unfamiliar. He is one of Marvel's first openly gay characters. Arnie was Steve's gay friend who fought with him against Hydra. His story got a little bit of development by Anthony Oliveira in the book Avengers Academy, and the end of this story actually takes place during events in Avengers Academy. I will just say, I'm a bit disappointed that Michael, his lover, was not in the story at all, because, like, a girl likes a bit of romance, you know? This story has Captain America bring up the erasure of queer history in current times, clearly pointing a jab at current situations. We love stories with politics. You're My Best Friend, an interview with G.M. DeMatteis. An interview with the creator of Arnie Ross. Love his minds. Steve's best friend was a black man. He was dating a Jewish woman. If he is a well-rounded American, surely he will have a gay friend. And that's how I got Arnie Ross. To finish this book off, they pitch you a Marvel Unlimited subscription so you can read Avengers Academy. Okay, makes sense. Avengers Academy, available on Marvel Unlimited. Queer team, queer book, makes sense. But they also pitch you Astonishing X-Men and Astonishing Avengers. I don't think any of those are queer, but I guess they are Marvel Unlimited.
Wiccan and Hulkling, Raid of Ultron.
Marvel Voices Pride 2026, actually named Wiccan and Hulkling Raid of Ultron, focuses on Marvel's gayest family. It's actually Wanda Envision's hypothetical extended family. They do provide us with a handy-dandy little family tree at the end of the book, which probably would have been better served at the beginning of the book. But anyway.
Family matters.
Teddy and Billy are trying to host their families at their newest house, the Baba Yaga shack that they just got. But things go awry when the reunion gets interrupted by Ultron. Various versions of him, in fact. I guess he's big mad because he did not get invited. This story is also split up inside the book, but since all of the other stories are happening at the same time, it makes a little bit more sense than the last time we got a split story. The guests are split into 4 locations. Billy and Tommy end up in a MasterChef Bake-Off knockoff studio. Teddy and Phila end up in a set looking like Game of Thrones. And Viv and Vision end up at the Sanctum Sanctorium. At the end, everybody joins back together to defeat the remaining Ultron variant, and then they all sit down to have a nice lunch.
Mixed signals.
I love this story. You can really tell this was written by someone who has siblings. A twin, in fact. I just love the back and forth bickering. Tommy tries to help Billy with his problems while they fight Ultron and asks him many questions about his relationship with Teddy. Everything from who cooks, do you share your location, to do you want to have kids? I love a little bit of domesticity, so of course I am a sucker for this kind of thing. They beat up Ultron and reunite with the family. Tommy picks up a gossip magazine with relationship advice that we see him sneak out at the end. Now, this is just me, but Luciano Vecchio did do a variant cover for this book with Tommy and David. And as someone who has been in the trenches for this ship for over a decade now, and was there when it became canon, listen, I need them back like I need air to breathe, okay? So, if Tommy wants to take some relationship advice to try and work things out with David, I would personally love that. So do I like the story more because of the hypothetical potential? Maybe. Maybe.
En garde.
Teddy and Philibel battle Ultron as Teddy asks for some big sister advice. He is worried his relationship with Billy might change since they settled so young. What if things get boring? Phil assures him that while his concerns are valid, he shouldn't be worried about things getting boring if this is what their day-to-day comes to. You try to throw a party for your family and you get swarmed by Ultrons trying to repossess your father-in-law type stuff. Again, I love the domestic stuff and the heart-to-heart.
Machine learning.
Viv and Vision battle a dad-bod Ultron and his valley girl of a daughter called Ultronica, while Viv and Vision discuss why Viv didn't bring her girlfriend to the party. Viv talks about feeling insecure about whether they would approve of her, with Vision ensuring that they would always approve of Viv because they love her. Ultron says that Viv seems much more simpler to program than his own daughter and asks Vision how he did it. Vision answers that family is not something that you can program. An interview with Tegan and Sarah. I'm gonna be so honest with you. I am so confused about this interview. Tegan is the writer for Mixed Signals, and Sarah is her identical twin. Okay, so like Tommy and Billy, they also got the twin thing going around, but I don't think Sarah is involved in the production of any of this. I thought she might have been some sort of consultant for Tegan, but she says in an interview that she didn't get to read the story because she was so busy, but she found the art very beautiful. Sarah is not credited in the book, but Tegan does say that Sarah is her biggest cheerleader. So, like, are they always a double act? They are musicians, they have like 10 albums, and they have also worked on graphic novels, which I guess is how their connection to comics is made. But this interview is so odd because they barely talk about comics. And when they do bring up comics, it's the one that we just read. I don't think it adds anything of value to it. They talk about loving Tommy and Billy, but they don't even mention anything that they really like. They say, I want to see where they go. Like, babe, you are writing the comic. They can go wherever you want. Again, they barely talked about comics and barely talked about a Marvel in their interview. I liked Tegan's story. It was my favorite from the bunch. But I don't know. This interview was really odd. And I guess it might have really benefited from the podcast format. But I guess they don't do Marvel Voices podcasts anymore now, do they? Right, I want to address the family tree again. Why is it not complete? Pietro has a daughter. Why is she not included in the family? I know that makes the family tree like 10 times bigger if we start actually putting everyone in there, but like, come on. And also, there's so much discussion about bringing your partners to their reunion. Can Pietro bring Monet next time? I just feel like she would be fun at the family reunion. Like, so, with everything said and done, the scores are set. And our winner is, surprisingly to me, Wiccan and Hulkling Rid of Ultron. Which I am kind of mad about, to be honest. Because the second runner-up is Pride 2021, where we had 14 stories. We had great interviews and bonus content that led you to do some digging for yourself. The 2026 story has 4 stories. And I guess when you have less stories, there's a little bit less room for error. If you don't write stories that piss me off, of course. Looking at you, Wedding Special, that is the bottom of the barrel. This issue is also priced cheaper than most other Pride anthologies, but you do also get half of the content, so I think the price is alright. Right, this is the part where I didn't actually write anything down and I'm just speaking off the top of my head, which always goes great. So, what are my final thoughts on the Pride anthologies? Bro, they're really lacking. Can someone explain to me how Gambit has been featured in more Pride stories than Didnt has? Didnt is half of Marvel's first on-panel kiss between 2 main superheroes, and he has never even made a cameo in any of the Pride stories. Shatterstar has. Shatterstar appeared in the German Carnation story in 2023. But Didnt has never been in a Pride book. Another character that has never made it onto Pride is Julie Powers. Julie Powers literally got featured in that essay that Angela Roche wrote about the Comics Code Authority. The one where we also get Taku and Venom. They talk a little bit about her relationship with Carolina, which of course at that point didn't even matter anymore because Carolina was already with Nico. Yeah, they bring her up and then she's never featured in any story. And then we have the characters who I think are overrepresented. Black Cat, I'm coming for your ass. Why is she everywhere? I feel like besides Destiny and Mystique, and maybe Hulkling and Wiccan maybe, she might be the one character that keeps popping up the most. And her stories were particularly interesting even. And that's okay. Sometimes a story doesn't have to be interesting, it just has to be fun. I think the biggest offender really is when they are neither. Nor interesting, nor fun. Also, then I didn't finish what I started, but I don't think we can say that Mystique and Destiny and Hulkling and Wiccan are overrepresented, given that they literally had each a book about themselves as a pairing. So I guess we have to look at them with a bit more grace. So yes, Black Cat, please stop popping up in every goddamn Pride book. It's pretty harsh to talk about overrepresentation, let's be honest, because like I don't think any of these characters is getting overrepresented. You know, a character that I would expect to have had another Pride story by now would be Bobby. Iceman. Iceman had the Early Thawne one, and that's it. But you know what's interesting? That we have had a Kyle Gina's story, but not a Jean-Paul one. because the man I love is from Kyle's perspective. That's quite interesting. If you allow me, I'm gonna run some statistics to tell you more about these. The covers tell the book, but then sometimes they don't really are representative of what is happening in the book. Oh yeah, another offender of having a story that is never fun as Loki. Fuck that. Oh my god. America Chavez. America Chavez does not have a Pride story at all. She has cameos. She appears in the X's and the Nexus one. And she also appears in the Jim Carnation story. She's in a bunch of covers, and yet no story about her. Right, so I think my conclusion to this is that the Pride 2021, the OG book, is actually the best one, regardless of the fact that I gave a higher score to Weekend and Hulkling. Again, that one has 4 stories, Pride 21 has 14. We just get a much bigger variety of stories, identities, and creatives, which I think is what these books should be looking to highlight. I really want to look at the book and say, hey, we got 14 creative teams to work on these stories. I think that is much more rich than just having 4 stories for creative teams. Now, I think, like I said, I don't want to believe in overrepresentation. I believe there is space for all of these, but I do enjoy the variety of the OG, the first ones that had much more stories in them. I think they're much more rich. Also, you may notice that the graphics change slightly from year to year. Some years they added roles, some years they added pronouns, sometimes they take one back, they put another one. That's not me not trying to give you all the information. I'm literally copying what Marvel wrote in the original book. I'm not adding any details that are not in the book. So that's why the graphics are different from year to year. You know who has not had a Pride story that I feel like would have had one by now? Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde debuted as queer kind of somewhat recently. And she could have had a Pride story by now. She does not have one. Anyway, let's do some Pride predictions for 2027, shall we? You know, I'm gonna do my clown makeup again, but I want to say that maybe perhaps for 2027, maybe we will finally get a Return Shatterstar story for Pride. Return Shatterstar are going to be in a comic book, in 2 comic books actually, coming September this year. So I feel like those comics, that comic run, might run a little bit until like February or something. I'm guessing it's like a 5-issue mini, let's be honest. I don't know how much longer Inglorious X-Force is gonna run for, and how much are they gonna keep popping up in that one. Whatever the case may be. Of course, I'm always in for them popping up more, but I'll take what I can get. So if they are still in a comics run by February, I think they are a bit more likely to also then pop up for Pride, because they are a bit fresher in people's mind. Maybe they'll pop up in the cover. Return Shatterstar have never made it to a cover. More predictions, more predictions. I'm gonna bet there's another Black Cat story. They give her a 1-year hiatus. She needs to get back on that grind. Oh my god, you know who also is kind of interesting that has never made it onto Pride? Now I'm gonna sound like a goddamn loser because I can't remember this character's name, but the gay character from the Eternals. Maybe that, I guess that movie just did not have like big synergy for comics, hey? Or is that because they killed Cersei in the comics in like Judgment Day and then they just never picked up the Eternals again? I'm not sure. But yeah, that's a character that I would have figured would have gone on to appear in Pride Voices and did not. Right, I think I'm gonna wrap this up because I'm not sure what else to tell you. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please let me know which one of these stories is your favorite. Who would you like to have a story featured in the 2027 anthology Marvel Voices Pride? And never forget, Pride was a riot. I'll catch you all later. Goodbye!